In
Yeah.
the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, good afternoon, everyone. We are happy to host you in another School of Persian Medicine webinar with the help of Appraise to Raise Group and Western Sydney University of Australia. Today, my name is Rida Bahram Sultani. I am Vice Dean for International Affairs at School of Persian Medicine, Tehran University of Medical Sciences. Today, we're going to talk about the role of medicinal plants in mental health. And we are honored to be the host of one of the pioneers in this field, Professor Jerome Saris from National Institute for Complementary Medicine, Western Sydney University in Australia, who kindly accepted our invitation to join us and share his knowledge and experience at this webinar. We're also going to talk about the role of adaptogens in mental health, which would be talked and discussed by Dr. Nusha Ismailzadeh, a PhD candidate of traditional pharmacy. For your kind information, the session's being recorded to be later shared on YouTube channel, and we also have live broadcast on Facebook. We all know that mental problems have a negative impact on our quality of life, like social interactions or our family life. We always look to manage such conditions with different methods, different medicines, and preferably natural products and herbal medicines. Nisha Ismailzadeh has been graduated with PharmD degree from Mazandaran University of Medical Sciences. She is now a PhD candidate of traditional pharmacy at Tehran University of Medical Sciences, School of Persian Medicine. Recently, she has authored a paper published in the Phytomedicine Journal with an impact factor 6.6, which was supervised by Dr. Roja Rahimi and Dr. Saris. The topic was about herbal adaptogens, and that is what she is going to talk about today. Nisha, I'm happy to see you. And if you agree, it would be a good question to firstly discuss what an adaptogen is. Maybe our audience are not familiar with the definition, the exact definition of an adaptogen. So if you agree, we can talk about firstly that what adaptogens are and how they can affect our mental health.
Yeah, sure. I want to say hello to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be part of this program, and thank you, Dr. Bahram Sultani, for managing this great session. Of course, I agree with you, this topic of adaptogens and also herbal drugs that can help us through mental problems are very interesting topics. And I'm so glad to present herbal adaptogens and their role and their effect on mental health. Is my slides visible for you? My side. Thanks. Okay. So, what are, you had the question of what are adaptogens? I want to say that firstly, the first official use of adaptogens has been actually recorded in Soviet Union during World War II, when they were looking for some kind of herbal drugs to increase their resilience during stressful condition they were facing. And they wanted to give their this medication to their pilots and to their soldiers to move on through stressful conditions. That was the first official use of adaptogens. But nowadays we can also, especially for this past 4 years, we've experienced different mental conditions or stressful conditions due to various viral disease like COVID-19, and now we have the monkeypox and also HPV. All this situation, along with our daily stressful life because of our jobs, can lead us to maybe depression or anxiety. Maybe we can not sleep well anymore. And because of this, people are turning to different ways of calming themselves down and getting back to their normal status. One of these ways is using herbal drugs, and one of the good choices are adaptogens. Adaptogens are herbal drugs that can help us adapt to the new condition we're facing, adapt to the stress situation. Let's move on. Okay, let's talk a bit about what stress is physiologically. We know that in the stressful condition, our body prepares us for the situation of fight or flight, and this can be achieved by releasing a great amount of catecholamines and stress hormones like cortisols into our blood circulation. This is the Hans Selye's theory of stress, which is saying that stress has 3 phases. One is alarm phase, which is that fight or flight situation. In this phase, we can see a great amount of catecholamines and cortisols, and also other stress mediators, which are releasing to our blood circulation, and can help us face with the problem. But in a long time, it can damage the cells and it can damage the organs. So what body does is tries to reduce this mediators as soon as possible. So after that, we can see a great significant decrease in the levels of these mediators, which can cause exhaustion. What adaptogen does, what an adaptogen actually does, is to lengthen the phase of resistance. It means that it can normalizes the levels of catecholamines and cortisol and help us to keep our energy and maintain our energy for a longer time. So the definition of adaptogens is changing constantly, but the most recent one is natural compounds that increase adaptability, resilience, and survival of organisms during stress. And we should note that adaptogens should be safe to normal people, to normal human beings. And it should not have any significant side effect, or it should do no harm, and it should normalize the status of the body. Adaptogens are normally can be classified into certain chemical class, but it's been observed that adaptogens are mostly found with this chemical structure: tricyclic triterpenes, phenylpropanoids, glycosides, stilbenes, and lignans. The indication that has been dedicated to adaptogens are stress-induced fatigue, mental and behavioral disorders, which are the focus of our current presentation, and aging. Here, I want to talk briefly about the mechanism of adaptogens. We should note that adaptogens can't be explained by the simple concept of one agent, one receptor, and one result, one therapeutic effect. We have multiple agents that affect multiple receptors, and they cause a certain therapeutic effect. This is the concept, this is based on the concept of network pharmacology. The mechanism of action of adaptogen can be looked on from two levels. One is from cell levels, which adaptogens help the body, help the cells to survive during stressful situation, and the other one is a regulation of metabolism and hemostasis via expression of stress hormones. Adaptogens can actually regulate the neuroendocrine immune system. Many different plants are currently under these investigations of their adaptogenic properties, but there are some plants which are considered, generally considered to be adaptogens, and it's been somehow proved. One is Panax ginseng, one of the most important, the most famous roots in the plant, I would like to say. I also want to mention that the active compound of Panax ginseng is ginsenoside. Another very important adaptogen is Schizandro Kinensis with the active compound of schizandrin. And also we have Eleutherococcus with the active compound of eleutheroside E, and the famous Rhodiola rosa, which is one of the oldest adaptogens that that's been using for a long time, with the active compound of saladroside. I want to mention that saladroside, the pure saladroside, has been under various investigations for its adaptogenic effects. Also, rhodiola has a great deal of tyrosol. Here, I have mentioned some of the most famous adaptogens in Ayurveda, which is so close to, which we know that Ayurveda is so close to Persian medicine, traditional Persian medicine. One of the most famous plants in this medicinal system is Ashwagandha, with the scientific name of Withania somnifera. Ashwagandha is, I think it's available in every single pharmacy around the globe. The capsules are available. People are familiar with it, and they're taking it during stressful condition. Another one is licorice, asparagus, tulsi, pepper, Beriana alba, amla, and haritaki. I want to say that this concept of adaptogens are not simply dated back, it's not simply dedicated to Soviet Union, but the concept has been formed a long time ago, maybe 1,000 years ago. And we can see the footprint of it in most of the traditional medicine systems. One is, for example, in Chinese medicine, as we know, there is a concept of the flowing energy in the universe, which is called qi. And this energy is also flowing in every organism which exists on this planet. So in order to lengthen the lifespan of an organism, this qi should be activated, should be fortified. So they developed a kind of drug compounds which were called qi tonics, which this concept is really close to adaptogens. Also, in Ayurveda, we know that this flowing energy of the universe is called prana, and also the flowing energy in our body is called rasa. So they say that adaptogen, the other name for adaptogens is rasayana, the fortifier of rasa. I was also thinking that maybe in Persian medicine, we can have this concept too. I want to ask Dr. Bahram Soltani if she can explain a bit about this concept in Persian medicine. Do we have something that is close to it or not?
Yeah, thanks for your question. It's interesting for me that most of the plants you're mentioning in this slide are also mentioned in Persian medicine, like ashwagandha, which is called eskande, or licorice, asparagus, tulsi, pepper, biryana alba, which is fashara amla, which has the same name, amele, haritaki. Now, haritaki is the Indian name for Terminalia chaboda, and in Persian medicine, it is called halile. Most of these plant materials are also mentioned in Persian medicine textbooks to have different properties, such as mufareh and teriyaq properties. These are Persian medicine terms. Like mufareh generally means something anxiolytic or with antidepressant properties, something causes happiness. So this category of drugs in Persian medicine, I think they mostly protect us against the environmental stressors, against mental stressors. So they protect our mentality. And also we have teriyaqs or teriyaqat, which are somehow similar to antidotes, not antidotes we use for, not something which is used for animals biting, not antivenoms. They are antidotes because they protect our cells, our body organs from environmental damages. So these medicines mostly have antioxidants, potent antioxidants and chemopreventive properties, and they prevent our cells from different environmental damages. And I believe these two categories of medicines in Persian medicine are highly in line with the definition of adaptogens in the official definition of adaptogens, because they help us to adopt our mental status and our body, our physiological properties, physiological functions of our body organs with different environmental changes, negative environmental impacts. So that's interesting that we have most of these plants mentioned in our textbooks. Nisha, you talked about that adaptogens are a general concept that involves many different pathways, like neurotransmitters, like hormonal systems. Can you give us a bit more information about the mechanisms of adaptogens?
Yeah, sure. Before that, as you were mentioning, the concept of adaptogens in Persian medicine, I was thinking of saffron, which is also a general tonic. It is also mufareh, as you said. It has some great antidepressive effect, and also it is aphrodisiac. So I think saffron is a great pack for this concept in Persian medicine. Yeah, let's go through some molecular mechanism. One of the most significant thing that adaptogens can do is to activate in a cellular level, I want to say, is activating neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y is really important agent during stressful situations. It can activate heat shock protein and deactivate Fourcade box 1, which results in result in improvement in innate immune system. It can cause neuroprotection, and it also has antidepressive and anxiolytic properties. It also helps organisms with higher cognitive function. Adaptogens can have some other molecular effects, like upregulations of toll-like receptor 9, which has a great part in innate immune system. The other one is upregulation of protein kinase C and MAPK 10 and 13, which together help us with the proliferations of the cells. And another effect is activation of melatonin signaling pathway. Let's go a bit deeply into the mental effect of adaptogens. Here we can see that during stress, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis activates, and it releases some hormones, like it activates a series of hormones which result in secretion of adrenaline and cortisol in the body, which prepares us for the stressful condition. But this situation can last for a long time because it can damage cells and can damage organs. So we have this factor, neuropeptide Y, which will be increased after the incretion of cortisol and adrenaline. It starts to suppress this HPA axis to protect the body. And it can actually prolong the resilience and the lifespan of the cells. It can protect neurons, and it can help us with its antidepressive effects. Here, I want to talk a bit about the clinical aspects of some of the most famous adaptogens. We know that not so much clinical trials has been done on adaptogens so far, but Rhodiola rosa is one of the most, actually is one of the oldest adaptogens with clinical trials. So here I have brought a brief summary of its clinical aspects. Rhodiola rosa can actually work as stimulant for during fatigue, and also during rehabilitation periods following somatic and infectious diseases. It also can be used to recover mental and physical working capacity in intensive mental and physical work. It also can, it has a very interesting property, which is counteracting with side effects of conventional psychiatric drugs. This is very important, I think. Rhodiola is also aphrodisiac. It should be pointed that for actually reaching its maximum amount of effect, rhodiola should be used before and during the stressful condition. Adaptogens are, as we mentioned, they are generally considered to be safe, but some side effects has been observed with preparations of rhodiola, like excitement, irritability, insomnia, and headache. The other plant that I want to talk about is Schizandro Kinensis. The common name for it is 5-flavored berry. This is really popular in Ukraine and Russia. This plant can also used during asthenodepressive status. It can also improve general mood, and it can reduce fatigue, and also it can be used as stimulant for patients with psychosis. Like rhodiola, Schizandro can also eliminate the side effects of conventional psychiatric drugs. So all in all, I want to say that adaptogens can increase attention and endurance during situation of decreased performance and fatigue. Also, they can reduce stress-induced impairment and disorders related to function of stress. Here, you can find our recently published article, and if you're interested in adaptogens, I suggest you to take a look at it, at this publications that we've done. Thanks for your attention, and I wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Nusha. It was really informative for me personally, because before publishing, actually before selecting such topic for your paper, I personally had no idea of what an adaptogen is, and that was a technical term completely new for me. But now I understand that we have such background and old background in our history of medicine in Iran and in other parts of the world. Maybe just the term has changed, or a new term was somehow designed for such preparatives. And I think maybe the audience have some questions. Yes, Dr. Adel has asked whether these plants are available in our region. Some of, I think that some of them are, yeah, they are available in Iran, but some no, some are somehow cultivated. I mean, they are brought from other countries to Iran, and some of them are completely exported. They're not grown in Iran because of the geographical features and the habitats not suitable for the plant species. So you can find the supplements in the market, but in some cases you cannot find the plant material, raw plant material in the herbal market. Yeah. And let's see if there's any other question here. Well, you can also, our dear audience can also think up to the end of the presentations and write their questions at the end of the session if they wish. So thank you very much, Nusha, for your speech. I really enjoyed it. And well, Nusha has told us about some benefits of medicinal plants and mental status and mental disorders. But you know that a lot of people think that medicinal plants are completely safe. They have no side effects, no adverse effects, because they originate from nature, and Mother Nature doesn't harm her children. But maybe the fact is something different. Each medicinal plant has a specific dose to show therapeutic properties, therapeutic beneficial effects, and if you have taken a higher dose, or if you use it without indication, that may cause severe problems. So I guess that we're going to listen to Professor Saris talking about the dark side of the moon. Dr. Saris is a professor of integrative mental health at National Institute for Complementary Medicine in Western Sydney University of Australia. And he also has an honorary position at the University of Melbourne. He specifically works on psychoactive medicinal plants in mood and anxiety disorders, and has published several significant papers in his field. So it's a great pleasure for us to be with you, Professor Saris, today, and I'm really thankful, grateful that you have accepted our invitation. The platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bahram Soltani. Can you see the screen there? Is that, it's good? Yes, excellent. And thank you for that wonderful talk as well, Dr. Nishu. That was absolutely wonderful. And I'm very grateful for the invitation to speak with you all. colleagues and friends from Persia. So it's a great honor for me as well. So thank you for the invitation. And I have collaborated with some of you over the years, and especially Professor Rojan. And I just, yeah, it's been wonderful over the years to work with many of you. So thank you. So today I will be indeed talking about and I like that phrase, the dark side of the moon. Being a Pink Floyd fan, I'm not too sure if people, if you're aware of the Pink Floyd album Dark Side of the Moon. It was I think it's the second highest or third highest selling rock album of all time by Pink Floyd. And they did cover psychedelic medicine, well, certainly through their personal experience and their music, quite a lot. So I guess the first plant I'm going to cover is kava, which is not psychedelic, but then I'll move on to a little bit of our work with psychedelics. And of course, to firstly just preface that in certain jurisdictions, I'm not too sure in Iran whether it's legal or not, so I'm certainly not encouraging or advocating for the use. I'm just obviously speaking about the current evidence and the use of such substances in clinical trial settings. In terms of disclosures, I do also work at a not-for-profit, and we are capital raising as well to fund some of the not-for-profit research as well. Some of my original work was with the plant kava, which is used right throughout the South Pacific. It's used usually in the root form, so the ground pulverized root form, placed in a tanoa or a bowl of water, and the active constituents are extracted from the water or into the water, and people will drink it in a ceremonial and a recreational manner. Can reduce anxiety, tension, and also may improve mood. There has been some issues with the quality of kava being exported about 15, 20 years ago, led to the withdrawal of kava, especially with concerns over hepatotoxicity. But over the last 2 decades, it certainly does appear to be far safer in terms of the quality of kava, which is being used medicinally. And there is the importance, of course, to use specific cultivars of kava, the peeled rootstock, only using the water-soluble extract, essentially the way it's used traditionally. Kava works on the GABA system. So it doesn't necessarily, or the carvalactones bind directly to the GABA alpha receptors. It may facilitate ligand binding, but it does also work on regulating GABA transmission to do with mainly sort of calcium and sodium channel modulation. It also is well, at least in animal models, a noradrenaline and dopaminergic reuptake inhibitor. And for some people, the experience of that may be that it gives them a little bit of a buzz. Unlike alcohol, it doesn't cloud the mind, that the person can feel very sharp mentally, but then feel physically relaxed. I'm not too sure what the status is in Muslim countries, but and I certainly don't mean to speak in anything which I don't know, but I think with kava, at least there is, from what I understand, which is important in your culture, to only be able to have substances which do not cloud the mind, which the person is mentally sharp and focused. And I think kava is, to my understanding anyway, one of those substances that you feel physically relaxed, but it doesn't cloud the mind like other substances like alcohol or benzodiazepines. There are 6 major carvalactones, which are the principal parts of the effects, I should say, in respect to kava chemistry. Carvane and dihydrocarvane tend to be regarded as the most anxiolytic resinoids in kava. For example, dihydromethysticin is found in other types of cultivars, which may give a bit of a hangover, so a little bit more of a physically groggy effect, which may continue to occur the day after. We conducted some original research at the University of Queensland in Brisbane quite a few years ago looking at a water-soluble extract of kava for treating raised anxiety levels. And we gave 250 milligrams of carvalactones. The adults had raised levels of anxiety and they had differing levels of depression. It was a small crossover study. First week, there was a placebo run-in. Then people who responded to placebo were removed. And then they were either given kava or placebo and then for a week and then crossed over. Just thinking this time of night, our wonderful previous speaker, I think, spoke English better than I'm currently doing. So it just shows you. So in terms of the outcomes, you can see with the first week there, this is the magenta on the Hamilton Anxiety Rating Scale. There wasn't much movement in reduction for anxiety for the kava group, for the placebo group. Then they were crossed over to kava and then there was a reduction, whereas with the broken lines on the hammer, people's anxiety was markedly reduced in the first week taking kava, and then it was reversed in the crossover period for the second week. And the same was mirrored for the depression outcomes, but not quite as strong. We then conducted a follow-up study. It was an 8-week RCT. There was a 1-week placebo run-in, and then there was 6 weeks of kava, which was titrated in non-response. And this involved participants with generalized anxiety disorder, so looking at a clinical cohort. We also covered a range of other outcome scales, which I won't have time to talk about today, and also looked at genetic polymorphisms. So in terms of the full sample, you can see on the left, there was a significant difference in the baseline to endpoint reduction on the Hamilton Anxiety Rating Scale for people taking kava compared to placebo. However, this was, I should say additionally, it was stronger in people with pure GAD, so no other comorbidities, just the GAD diagnosis by itself, which is fairly uncommon. Usually people have other comorbid psychiatric disorders. So we're then fortunate enough to receive government funding, which is our National Health and Medical Research Council, funding to test kava across a 16 weeks period of time. And this was once again a standardized water-soluble form of kava, and we gave 240 milligrams per day. We didn't have a placebo run-in. We didn't think that would be an issue because it was such a long study. There was a run-out just to see whether there was any withdrawal effects. So our target was 105 in the kava group and 105 in the placebo group, and this was also for people with generalized anxiety disorder. We did also some fMRI and MRS, which I'm not presenting on today, some of the imaging data, as well as the gene expression data. But lots to cover today, so unfortunately I won't be covering that. So we analysed 86 in the kava group and 85 in the placebo group. And the results, unfortunately, no separation. So very disappointing. Certainly it is harder to treat generalized anxiety disorder. And as you can see there, over time, over the 16 weeks, there was no real separation between placebo and kava. So in terms of my, I guess, take-home message in regards to kava, there is, I think, a solid body of use, and it is used quite commonly and for good reason, that by Pacific Island people, that it is relaxing, it's calming, may have good muscle relaxation effects. But in terms of being a first-line intervention for GAD, we can say, I think, reasonably confidently that it's not that effective. Even the previous study, the effect size was fairly weak. I mean, you saw the p-value was 0.046, and I think the effect size was fairly modest as well. So I think, it's unfortunately not a frontline GAD intervention, but for short-term or intermittent anxiety or milder levels of anxiety, I think it can absolutely have a role. So moving on to medicinal cannabis. Once again, I'm unsure whether what the medical status is in your country. In Australia, we have had over the last few years a shift of policy that we can have now medicinal or medical cannabis, which is prescribed. Some of the work at Sydney University with my colleagues Ian McGregor and others have been following people with a cross-sectional analysis. So survey work, looking at people's use in Australia in regards to reporting what effects they get from it and also why they're using it. And in terms of the reported effects, people are reporting that either very much better or much better with anxiety, sleep, also in some cases depression and inflammation, although it should be noted that higher levels of THC in cannabis can actually in terms of the main conditions, and I think it just mainly for pain, sleep, anxiety, and a range of psychiatric disorders. And I think, of course, and as very commonly clinically, is that people will present sleep issues. They have some. So it's provided to potentially address a range of those symptoms. THC is generally the predominant constituent which cannabis is standardized for, and that's what elicits for some people, the euphoria, the high, the pain-killing effect. Also may help with sleep. Whereas CBD tends to be a bit more relaxing, effects in terms of inflammation and muscle relaxation. It has some potential effects with insomnia. And there's some other minor cannabinoids, as well as the terpenes, which give the characteristic scent of cannabis. And depending on what terpene profiles there are, and also cannabinoids, you can get markedly different effects therapeutically between different cultivars. THC is a CB1 receptor agonist, and that can provide a potential antidepressant effect. But like I said before, in higher doses of THC, there's also some data saying it can actually evoke depression. But it primarily via this system modulates serotonergic and dopaminergic pathway effects. CBD is very interesting that there are some serotonergic effects, but interestingly, its main mechanism of action is via fatty acid amide hydrolase inhibition, and this is via the endocannabinoid system. And I think this gives it really quite an interesting effect that you won't get an intoxicating effect. So the mind still should be clear and still should have a relaxing effect, certainly somatically, and it will have less of the, as I said, the sort of intoxicating effects that the THC has as well. So in some cases, there is CBD studied by itself and also prescribed by itself away from the intoxicating THC. There are other roles as well, which is covered, as you can see there. Interestingly, also, I will say in terms of, which is discussed in terms of adaptogenic effects, it's not an adaptogen, but it can also modulate the neuroendocrine system as well as having immune modulatory effects. We conducted a review, gosh, this would have been several years now, time goes by, which looked at the first clinically focused systematic review of medicinal cannabis for psychiatric disorders. And I would like to say, yes, in the meantime, there's been lots of wonderful studies and lots to update on. But unfortunately, that's not the case. There's a little bit of research going on in Australia. What's happened, to my understanding, is that certain jurisdictions, such as the United States, they've started to really open up cannabis use recreationally. And thereby the downside of that is that we don't get enough research done on it, because if it can be used over the counter, it doesn't unfortunately spur on more research in the area. But in terms of research evidence, as I'm aware, There was 2 RCTs looking at CBD, that's our cannabidiol, for social phobia or social anxiety, and that did seem to find a reduction, but this is in fairly high doses, 400 milligrams and 600 milligrams per day. For GAD, there's some studies currently underway, and there's a youth study in Australia, so we'll see how that goes. Depression, as I said, higher THC load, you may need to be careful about that in terms of use for people with depression. OCD, there's 1 small RCT and some case studies and animal data could have a potential use. There was, for instance, a really nice CBD marble bearing task with, I think, rats or mice, which showed that after CBD administration in a OCD animal model, there was less, sort of haphazard marble bearing by the rodents. PTSD, there was quite an encouraging observational data which was revealed in America several years ago, but then they followed up with an NIH study with PTSD. Unfortunately, they could only use very poor quality cannabis, and that really, from what we could see, affected the outcome of their data. And I think that the researchers actually suing the government because they wouldn't let the researcher use good quality medicinal cannabis for the study. So for some people, it could potentially help them manage night terrors and PTSD and improve their sleep. But it is a case-by-case basis. There's a small RCT with ADHD with mixed evidence, and schizophrenia. There's some mixed evidence, although encouraging, and this is just, it should be said, for CBD, as you see, is absolutely contraindicated in people with psychotic disorders. And in fact, there's fairly strong data coming out of the United Kingdom that people, and especially adolescents, who use high THC cannabis in their teen years, and they have a susceptibility genetically towards schizophrenia, will have, in increased cases, a triggering of their schizophrenia from the use of high THC. So very important to avoid in that cohort. And insomnia, there is some data to do with the use of CBD, but quite a few studies in Australia, interestingly, up and running to do with CBD use for insomnia. But I would think personally that for some people, they may need a THC formulation because it will have, I think, a bit stronger sedative effects. So prescriptive considerations, I won't spend too much time on it. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's, it might not be prescribed in your country, but just to say, it's just a matter of, we're trying to avoid high dose THC in people who it's not suitable for. And it's a matter of working out whether that's ingested, because it can take, a couple hours to work, or whether people need immediate relief and they use vaporized forms, for example, and also considerations around the dosage and how much CBD to use. So moving on to the final part of the talk, should be able to wrap this up in 5-10 minutes. Psychedelics. So I think it's fair to say, for those of you who are aware of the evolving data, it really has exploded in many jurisdictions across the world in terms of using some plant-based psychedelics. There's also some interest with MDMA, which is it's not really a psychedelic, it's a type of amphetamine-based compound for PTSD. But our psilocybin from our psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, which is a 2-plant preparation containing DMT and humala alkaloids, which I'll talk about, and also, although not strictly speaking, plant-derived LSD as well. In terms of where we're at in Australia, we've been trying to advance the agenda in regards to developing robust research. So we're not out there advocating the use of these hallucinogens. It's about doing, good, proper, randomized, controlled clinical studies. We've got recent funding to do this. In terms of our regulations, it's still really only being approved for clinical trial use, not for patients currently. These particular compounds, they work primarily via the 5-HT2A receptor agonism pathway, or I should say serotonergic pathway, but via agonism of those receptors. And if you look at those particular compounds, if you look at the construction, they're very similar to serotonin, which is quite interesting that they are, in a sense, serotonin analogs, more or less. LSD is a fair bit more complicated, but if you look at DMT, I think that's really quite interesting how similar it is. We conducted with colleagues, this was led by Professor Nicole Galvão-Coelho over in Brazil. She visited us in Western Sydney, which was wonderful, in Westmead. We conducted this meta-analysis, involved 12 eligible studies, 124 participants, 133 of whom had a mood disorder. And we looked at just focusing on classical serotonergic psychedelics, so LSD, ayahuasca, and psilocybin. Looking at the data, you can see with that meta-analysis in regards to just acute effects, effects I should say, of the psychedelics on affect, so on negative mood state. This was looking at immediately a few hours after administration of these agents or the next day. There was indication that it did improve negative mood state, at least acutely, for psilocybin and LSD. And then when we looked at acute effects, medium-term effects, and long-term effects on depressed mood with these particular interventions, there weren't that many studies, and there's certainly a few more psilocybin studies now which we could assess. But by and large, there was fairly encouraging evidence in terms of ayahuasca, psilocybin, and LSD improving people's depression. Now, of course, that's not to say that there aren't challenges, for example, with blinding, that people may know that they're having a psychedelic medicine, and that's a whole different discussion in terms of trying to improve the rigor of these studies. But regardless, yeah, encouraging data. You may have seen Robin Carhart-Harris's paper. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which I'm sure we all wish we would publish in. That would be a career-changing event. And this was comparing psilocybin to escitalopram, the SSRI, in people with major depressive disorder. And as you can see with the top right there, even though it was only at certain points statistically superior, it certainly was numerically superior, psilocybin reducing people's depression over escitalopram in a head-to-head study that wasn't a placebo, but at least as a non-inferiority study, this was fairly compelling. And also quality of life, you can see in the bottom one, was improved markedly with the psilocybin. Now, the psilocybin preparation, usually I should say that there's psychological preparation beforehand. So people will have several counseling sessions, see a psychologist, work through and get prepared for the dosing session, as well as to build up a therapeutic relationship. And then they'll be given the psilocybin in a controlled setting, usually with blinds on, music, very supportive space. They'll get the psilocybin or placebo if it's a controlled study. And then there's the integration part. They'll see the psychologist again and work through emotions, feelings, traumas, which may have been brought up during the experience. So there's a psychological process with it, but there's also a biological effect, really, of rewiring the brain pathways, obviously having a very strong stimulatory effect on the serotonergic receptors as well. So, and that process may be repeated with the second psilocybin dosing a few weeks later. So finishing up on ayahuasca. So this is a decoction primarily of two Amazonian plants. So the Banisteriopsis caapi, which is a vine, and Psychotria viridis, which is a shrub. Now, the Banisteriopsis contains beta-carbolines, which are harmaloid alkaloids. There's three main ones: tetrahydroharmine, harmaline, and harmine. And the Psychotria is the shrub which contains the DMT, so the dimethyltryptamine, which gives the psychedelic effect. But interestingly, it's not orally active, bioavailable. So you need the beta carbolines to stop its breakdown, so it sustains the effect, roughly about 4 to 6 hours. Now, interestingly, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you about some of this at some point. Peganum hamala. So I think it's called Syrian rue, but I'm sure in your country it's fairly prolific as well. So Peganum hamala, the seeds, and I think they're used for spiritual and religious uses as well. So that can also be used, and that's very rich in hamalas, well, primarily harmine, and it can also be used in more contemporary formulations of ayahuasca in substitution for the Banisteriopsis. So we're actually, for some of the work we're doing, importing in some Peganum hamala seed for some of our psychedelic work as well. So we're very keen to hear about where we can get good quality standardized seeds from some of you, well, some of your contacts maybe. So this can be consumed over several sessions. Traditionally in the Amazon, they may do it very regularly, drinking the ayahuasca. Apart from the psychedelic effects, so having different effects, visionary experiences, hallucinations, auditory, visual, very strong spiritual connection usually for many people. They may have a connection to with their trauma, so maybe childhood traumas. They may have a purgative effect, so it can actually, via the serotonergic symptom, make people throw up. So with the purging, they actually may find this emotionally and spiritually purging to do with past traumas and pains. And it gives, in many instances, people going through a very strong personal experience where they confront aspects of themselves which they may not be aware of, traumas, issues with relationships and so forth, and get very strong personal insights. We conducted the Global Ayahuasca Project. This was a survey led by my colleague, Associate Professor Daniel Perkins. About 12,000 people who had previously used ayahuasca, and we wanted to see whether there was any relationship to do with a range of variables, including anxiety and depression and alcohol use as well. So I'll just go straight to the data. You can see that in terms of people reporting for anxiety and depression symptoms, whether this had a positive effect, so that completely remove their anxiety, depression, or partially improved. You can see there with the sort of dark to the lighter blues. The majority of people did report that it did have a very positive, profound effect on their anxiety and depression symptoms. And that's not to say that it's not a captive sample, that people are writing in who had a great experience, and that the people who didn't, didn't comment on that. There were, I think it was 2 to 4% of people who did report it made them worse, and that's why it's important. People may go away to Peru and South America, have these experiences, but then if they're not having support psychologically and spiritually after the experience, for some people it may actually be worse for them. And in some instances it may not be appropriate, that they need to be screened, and it might be a case that they shouldn't be taking it. So there are some challenges regarding that. In terms of alcohol use, there's also very strong data showing that it reduced problem drinkers or risky drinkers in terms of the amount which they were drinking, and also drug consumption. So it may also have an effect, besides mood and anxiety, on removing alcohol from people's lives, or at least lowering it and limiting that. Some of my colleagues also over in Brazil did a randomized controlled trial. This was in a hospital setting, a very small sample, 29 patients. This is people with treatment-resistant depression, and looked at ayahuasca versus placebo. And they had, really quite strong effects there. You can see with the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, but the Madras Depression Scale on the bottom there, really quite a nice reduction for ayahuasca, even in a hospital setting without any counseling, compared to placebo. And I was fortunate enough to be involved in this paper looking at whether there was a relationship with C-reactive protein concentrations. in respect to the depression levels, and indeed there was a significant correlation with people's C-reactive protein, so an inflammation marker being reduced, and that correlated with the reduction of depression as well. So there may be some anti-inflammatory mechanism occurring as well. And then finally, we have been given some government funding to test DMT in combination with Harmala preparation for treatment-resistant depression and alcohol use disorder. And we're doing a bit of pilot work shortly for that, and we'll be starting on our phase 2 study early next year. So we're very excited to be doing will be a quadruple blinded randomized controlled trial. So very excited about that. Future considerations, look, it's early days in this field. I think some of these medicines are quite exciting, but obviously we need the data to catch up and for there to be more robust clinical trials as usual. And we hope to, I guess, reveal to you in the years to come, the results of this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Soares. It was really impressive, and I'm so actually excited by the extent of the work you've done in your specific field. It was really impressive. You know, some of us, like myself, cannot concentrate, cannot focus on a specific field. We work on different body organs and different animal models or different clinical studies related to different disorders of human body, but you have deeply focused on one topic, one category of diseases and natural products in this category, and I don't know, kind of deep knowledge of and background of the study. You even compared the molecular structures of the compound. That was really interesting, and I'm sure that I'm going to read the full text of several of your papers that you shown. They really have educational effects, and I think we need to use them, at least one of them, in one of our upcoming journal clubs for students to learn and to understand how we should do such types of work. I have a question about kava, and I also invite other participants to ask their questions if they have any. You said that you have some clinical trials administering Carvalactones to patients. I was wondering if it was purified Carvalactone or it was herbal extract standardized based on specific amount of Carvalactone. And if it was purified Carvalactone, did you see any difference between Carvalactone and the plant total extract? Because in some cases, like Sandra's wort, which is used in depression, firstly, it was thought that the active compounds are hyperforin and the group of compounds which cause drug interactions, drug interactions with inducing effect on liver enzymes are exactly that active compounds. But later we found a lot of clinical trials on hyperforin-free Sandra's wort extract, which again has significant antidepressant properties without drug interactions. So I was wondering if such a thing can be discussed for kava. Maybe there are other phytochemicals which can have beneficial effects, but they do not have negative psychological impacts. Is it something like this?
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, certainly, and thank you for your kind comments. I will say, as Professor Rahimi will know, we've done a lot also on general herbal medicines in psychiatry and nutrients and some lifestyle medicine and all sorts of stuff. So it's, I would like to say I'm very focused, but it's blown out a lot over the years. We have done studies and published on St. John's wort, and I completely agree with you in terms of what is the active constituent. Sometimes it can be the combination of the active constituents. Sometimes it's constituents, like you're saying with St. John's wort, the flavonoids may also have some therapeutic effects, and hypericin. The non-hyperforeign extracts with hypericin and I think rutin and other flavonoids may still be equally effective as an antidepressant, but without the CYP3A4 and P-glycoprotein pump modulation, which can affect drugs. So you're right. In terms of kava, however, I mean, if you do an analysis, look at the chemistry of kava, it's the resinoids which really are the predominant constituent in the plant, and the vast majority of that are those 6 major carvalactones. So when the research we do will be standardized to total carvalactones, firstly, so say it might be 50 milligrams of carvalactones in a pill or a capsule. But then we look at the ratio. So we want to have a chemotype which has higher levels of carvane and dihydrocarvane, because we know that as isolates, there's some data showing that they're the best anxiolytics. And then the other ones we're not as bothered by. Some plants are more complex than that. You look at medicinal cannabis, there's over 144 cannabinoids. So you've got so many to standardize for. It's very much impossible. But I will say, yes, in terms of my personal work, we always look at the whole plant, standardized to the best actives as we understand it.
Thank you very much for your explanation. And I see that we have a raised hand here. The host, I think, can give audio access. Mrs. Sadeghi, could you please give audio access to Dr. Rahimi?
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It is Roja. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually, Professor Saris. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thanks a lot for outstanding presentation. I really enjoyed it. I would like to ask you a question. What is the approach of government of Australia about herbal products, especially those used in psychological disorders? For example, do you have products from kava or cannabis in your market? And are they prescribed or can be available as over-the-counter drugs?
Yes, thank you, and very lovely to hear your voice after years of corresponding online. So that's wonderful. Yes, so kava, for example, and other herbal medicines such as St. John's wort, they're available over the counter. So you can go to your shop, buy them. They're not prescribed, as in they're not prescribed medicines, but there are differences of quality. So some products may just say, oh, they're St. John's wort or kava, but you don't know the quality of it. You don't know the carvalactones or the hyperforin or hypericin. Whereas other products might say that. So it is more difficult for the consumer to know what they're taking, and that's why they need to see a health professional who knows the products. In terms of cannabis, that is prescribed by a medical doctor. So you have to get a script and see them, and then they'll say, yes, okay, we'll prescribe you this, and they'll write the script. It's quite expensive. Hundreds of dollars. Sometimes you got to see somebody and then get the script. Might end up being $200-300 for the appointment and the medicine. And the psychedelics at the moment on a federal level, our TGA, that's our Therapeutic Goods Administration, is saying if you're a psychiatrist and you think, yes, this person, I would like to try them on psilocybin, they'll give you permission to do it. Then at the state level, so you go to your local state, say in Victoria or New South Wales, say where Sydney is, you'll say, okay, I want to apply for a state license. And then they'll say, sorry, you can't have one. So it's very frustrating because there are some people who, you know, they've tried everything and they're really struggling, and their doctor would like to give them this opportunity, but presently that's not happening. And so we're only able to use it in clinical trials, but at least we can use it in clinical trials. So I guess that's at least one blessing. So did that answer? Hopefully it's okay. Yes, second.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cyrus. And do your physicians have enough knowledge about prescribing these medicines? For example, do psychologists have enough knowledge about these products?
I think all in all, not really. I don't think many of them are very comfortable. And then you can have a lot of stigma. You know, they say, oh, it's not a drug. And so there's a bit of negative thoughts about it. And this is one of my jobs, is to present the data to say, okay, look, there is surprisingly good evidence for this, but there isn't good evidence for X, Y, Z. I mean, for example, fish oils, we know with EPA, there's good solid evidence, you know, for that being an antidepressant, being potentially used alongside antidepressants. So there's some things we can educate physicians on, and a lot of the time they just don't have that knowledge, unfortunately. So then patients will see nutritionists, naturopaths, herbalists, you know, people who specialize in that area who may not be medical doctors.
Thank you very much for your comprehensive response.
That's good. Thank you, Dr. Rahim.
So I would like to thank again all participants, our dear audience, and specifically our dear lecturers. It was really nice and actually interesting to have such collaboration. And I see that a lot of participants, but in our webinar, more than 50 participants, and a lot from India. So it was a real international webinar. And again, I would like to say that the presentation was recorded, and those who may disconnected in a few minutes, they can return to the YouTube channel and see the recorded presentation. So thank you very much again, Professor Cyrus. Thank you for your time. It was really good to have you here today, and I hope we have the chance to have further collaborations in the future with you in these interesting topics.
I'm sure we will. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And dear everyone, I should say good afternoon, good evening, maybe, because you're at different time regions. Thank you all for participating and joining at this webinar, and have a good night.